got 1 head of cauliflower. This is another head, so that's a total of 4 pounds of cauliflower. You want to remove these outer leaves. Now these leaves themselves are edible. I like them in salads, but for our purposes, they're going to color the gratin a little bit, so we want to leave them out. Now start by taking off the stem, and we're going to core it. Take a paring knife and insert at an angle, and I just run my knife around, using the board to keep it stable, and then you've got a nice core. So we've got our core, and we've got our head. And one of the things about cauliflower that's challenging is that it has really hardy stem parts and some tender florets, and those two things cook at different rates. So we can have the core as part of the stem bowl, and we'll have a floret bowl. I'm going to halve this core, and I'm just going to go in and thinly slice it.
And you're leaving those little pale green leaves on, and that's okay.
That's okay. We just don't want a lot of them in there. We found that the best way to break down cauliflower was actually to slice it. So you want to get these 1/2-inch steaks as best you can. And I should preface this by saying it's going to get really messy.
It always does. Cauliflower just explodes when you start cutting into it. Those little bits everywhere.
Just trust in the process. So I take a steak, and we're going to trim these florets right off. So we get 1.5-inch pieces. And I just take a paring knife, and I just run my knife across. What's great about that is that everything is relatively the same size. Because it's all the same size, it'll cook at relatively the same rate. And you can just kind of break up these however you want. It doesn't have to be perfect, but relatively the same size is what you're going for. So now we have these little stem bits, and you want to go in and just thinly slice. You don't have to have immaculate knife skills or anything like that.
But you actually do have immaculate knife skills, and I love watching you chop. He has a very good claw, and by claw hand I mean the non-cutting hand is holding the food steady by keeping his fingertips out of the way so they don't get nicked by the blade as he chops. You have a very fine claw hand.
Oh, thanks. This is the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Alright, so we've got our stem mixture, and we've got our florets. The stems, we're just going to cook them in 3 cups of boiling water. On its own, it's not enough to make a sauce, so we're going to go in and add a couple more cups of the florets. Got 6 tablespoons of butter. This isn't a very heavy gratin, but you need some of that richness and subtle sweetness that butter provides. We're going to bring it up to a boil, and while that's happening, I've got a steamer basket. We tried all sorts of stuff with florets. We tried boiling, we tried roasting, but the best thing to do was just to steam it. Let's just not jostle that or anything. So this has come up to a boil, so we can drop in our florets. Cover it. We're going to reduce the heat to medium and cook these florets for 10 to 12 minutes until they're nice and tender.
Sounds great.
So it's been about 10 minutes. We're going to give a check on our florets.
Ooh, that smells cabbagey.
So I just take a paring knife, but you could use a toothpick, and it inserts super cleanly, little resistance, so we know it's ready to go. So we're just going to remove these florets, drain off as much of the liquid as you can, and then we'll transfer it to our bowl. Like I said, these stems take a little bit longer to cook, so we're going to keep them going over low heat for another 10 minutes. While that's going, we need to make a little crispy, crunchy topping for a gratin, because who doesn't love that? So I've got 2 tablespoons of butter melted and a 1/2 cup of panko. Panko's great. It gives a nice fluffy, crispy texture. And I'm going to cook this over medium heat, and this will take about 3 to 5 minutes until it's nice and golden brown. So it's been about 10 minutes. Let's give a check on our stems.
It really does smell cabbagey. I mean, it is part of the cabbage family. And Mark Twain famously said that cauliflower is just cabbage with a college education.
Did you really say that?
He did.
And as you can see, you can just mash it down with a fork. It's just pulverized. I'm going to take a ladle, and we're just going to go in. We're going to go ahead and blend this. And this is really hot, so anytime you're blending really hot foods or liquids, you want to make sure this is on really tight. And you also don't want to fill this blender top more than 2/3 full, because it's kind of just going to build pressure and explode. For some seasoning, we've got 2 teaspoons of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, a 1/2 teaspoon of dry mustard powder, 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg, a pinch of cayenne, and a half cup of parm.
Oh, hello.
Well, parm gives that salty richness that we really need in this gratin, but it doesn't make it like too heavy or gloppy or stodgy. So we'll give this a nice whir. Alright, so that's been about a minute. As you can see, it's pretty smooth and creamy. But on its own, this is a bit too thin to coat the florets, so we gotta tighten it up a little bit. And the best way to do that is just to add a little cornstarch slurry. I've got right here a teaspoon of cornstarch and a teaspoon of water. And we want to do this right now because if we had mixed it earlier, it would have stuck all together in the bowl and it would have been hard to get out. So we're going to have the blender running for like a minute more. And while it's running, I'll add in the slurry. The sauce goes right